What happens when a woman who clawed her way up from the Bronx to become one of the most famous entertainers on the planet sits down for what should be a victory lap interview, only to have her entire life's work dismissed as smoke and mirrors? What you're about to witness is one of the most shocking confrontations in daytime television history. The moment when Jennifer Lopez, a woman who has spent 3 decades perfecting her public image, finally let the mask slip and showed the world exactly what happens when you push her too far. The studio fell silent, the audience held their breath, and Joy Behar realized, perhaps too late, that she had picked a fight with the wrong woman. Before we dive into this explosive story, make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because trust me, you're going to want to talk about this one. The studio lights were blinding as Jennifer took her seat at the famous table. She looked flawless, as always. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was perfect. Everything about her presentation screamed control, precision, and an attention to detail that had become her trademark over 3 decades in the spotlight. The audience erupted in applause when she walked out. These were her fans, women who had grown up listening to her music, watching her movies, following her love life through tabloid headlines and Instagram posts. They cheered for the girl from the block who had made it all the way to the top. Whoopi Goldberg opened the segment with genuine warmth. Our next guest needs no introduction. She's a singer, an actress, a dancer, a producer, a businesswoman, and honestly, I'm probably forgetting about 5 other things. Please welcome the incredible Jennifer Lopez. Jennifer smiled that famous smile and waved to the audience. Thank you so much. It's so good to be here. I've always loved this show. The interview began smoothly enough. Sarah Haynes asked about the documentary, and Jennifer lit up, talking about the process of looking back at her life, the vulnerability of letting cameras capture both her triumphs and her struggles. She spoke eloquently about her children, about wanting them to understand where she came from and what she had sacrificed to build her career. You know, making this film was probably the hardest thing I've ever done, Jennifer said, her voice carrying that familiar mix of confidence and carefully calibrated emotion. It's one thing to perform on stage or act in a movie. It's another thing entirely to let people see the real you, the parts you've spent your whole life protecting. The audience was captivated. This was the Jennifer Lopez they had come to see. Glamorous but relatable, successful but still connected to her roots. The perfect celebrity package, polished to a high shine. Then Joy Behar leaned forward, and the energy in the room shifted like a storm, rolling in over calm waters. So, Jennifer, Joy began, her voice carrying that unmistakable edge that regular viewers knew meant trouble was coming. You talk a lot about being real and authentic in this documentary, but let's be honest here. Your entire career has been built on image management. How much of what we see is actually real, and how much is just very expensive PR? The question landed like a bomb in the middle of the studio. The other hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances. The audience went quiet. Jennifer's smile remained in place, but those who knew her well could see the slight tightening around her eyes. "I'm not sure I understand what you're asking, Joy," Jennifer replied, her voice still pleasant but now carrying a cautious undertone. "Everything in this documentary is real. These are real moments from my life, real struggles, real triumphs." Joy wasn't backing down. If anything, she seemed energized by the tension she had created. "But that's my point. You've been in this business for 30 years. You've had entire teams of people whose job is to make sure the public sees exactly what you want them to see. So, when you release a documentary about being authentic, isn't that just another form of image control?" The accusation was pointed and precise, designed to undermine the very foundation of what Jennifer was there to promote. Several audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Sunny Hostin looked like she wanted to change the subject immediately. "Joy, I think there's a difference between being professional about your career and being fake," Jennifer said, her composure still intact, but clearly being tested. "Yes, I have a team. Yes, I'm careful about my public image, but that doesn't mean the person you see isn't real. It just means I've learned how to navigate an industry that will tear you apart if you're not careful." "Navigate?" Joy laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Is that what we're calling it now? Because from where I sit, it looks more like manipulation. You've built an empire on convincing people you're still Jenny from the block while living a lifestyle that most people can't even imagine." The mention of her famous song was clearly calculated to sting. Jennifer's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The audience was now completely silent, sensing that they were witnessing something far more intense than a typical morning show interview. "That song was about never forgetting where you came from," Jennifer said, her voice dropping slightly. "It was about staying grounded no matter how much success you achieve. I'm sorry if you don't understand that concept, but it's been the guiding principle of my entire career." Joy leaned back with a smirk that could only be described as predatory. "Oh, I understand the concept perfectly. I just question whether you actually live by it. When was the last time you took the subway, Jennifer? When was the last time you waited in line at a grocery store? When was the last time you did anything that regular people do every day?" The attack was shifting now, becoming more personal. Jennifer's famous discipline was being tested in ways it hadn't been tested in years. She took a breath, visibly centering herself before responding. "Joy, I grew up sharing a bedroom with my two sisters in a small apartment in the Bronx. My mother worked multiple jobs to keep food on the table. I didn't have dance lessons or voice coaches. I learned by watching music videos and practicing in my room. Everything I have, I earned. So please don't sit there and lecture me about what regular people do, because I was one of those regular people for a lot longer than I've been famous." The response was powerful, delivered with the kind of controlled intensity that had made Jennifer Lopez a star in the first place. But Joy wasn't finished. She had come to this interview with an agenda, and she wasn't leaving until she had accomplished it. That's a lovely origin story, and I'm sure it plays well in documentaries. But let's talk about something more recent. Let's talk about your personal life. You've been married 4 times now. 4 times. Don't you think that says something about your judgment, or at least about your ability to maintain real relationships outside of the spotlight? Several audience members gasped. Alyssa Farrah Griffin's eyes went wide. Even Whoopi, who had seen plenty of controversial moments on the show, looked genuinely shocked by the direction Joy was taking the interview. This wasn't just provocative, this was personal, in a way that crossed clear boundaries. Jennifer's composure finally cracked, just slightly. Her eyes, which had been carefully warm and inviting throughout the interview, now carried something much colder. When she spoke, her voice had dropped to a register that her fans had never heard before. "My personal life is not up for your judgment, Joy. My marriages, my relationships, those involve real people with real feelings. I'm not going to sit here and let you reduce years of my life to some kind of punchline about my judgment." But Joy pressed forward, seemingly oblivious to the warning signs that everyone else in the studio could clearly see. "I'm just pointing out patterns, Jennifer. You fall in love publicly, you get married publicly, you get divorced publicly, and then you do it all over again. At what point does it stop being romance and start being content? At what point is your love life just another product you're selling?" The accusation was so cruel, so deliberately designed to wound, that for a moment Jennifer simply stared at Joy in disbelief. The woman who had performed for presidents, who had headlined the Super Bowl, who had built a billion-dollar brand from nothing, was momentarily speechless. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but carried a weight that seemed to fill the entire studio. "You want to talk about my love life, Joy? Fine, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what it's like to try to find real connection when every relationship you have is dissected by millions of people. Let's talk about what it's like to fall in love and know that if it doesn't work out, you'll be mocked and judged by people like you." She leaned forward, her eyes locked on Joy's face. "Let's talk about what it's like to have your heart broken in public, over and over again, and still have the courage to try again because you believe in love. That's not content, Joy. That's being human. But I wouldn't expect you to understand that." The counterattack was devastating in its precision. Joy's smirk faltered for just a moment before she recovered with her trademark defensive aggression. "I'm just asking the questions that everyone is thinking. Someone has to cut through the carefully managed image and get to the truth." "The truth?" Jennifer's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You don't want the truth, Joy. You want controversy. You want clicks. You want a moment that will trend on social media for the next 24 hours. That's not journalism. That's vulturism." The word hung in the air like an indictment. Joy's face flushed red, but before she could respond, Jennifer continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "You know what the truth is? The truth is that I've been working since I was 18 years old. The truth is that I've been told no more times than you can count. I've been told I'm too old, too ethnic, too ambitious, too much, and every single time, I've proven them wrong. That's the truth. But it doesn't fit your narrative, does it? Joy attempted to regain control of the conversation. I'm simply pointing out that there's a gap between the image you project and the reality of your life. That's a legitimate observation. A legitimate observation? Jennifer stood up from her chair, her full presence now commanding the entire studio. Let me tell you about legitimate observations, Joy. A legitimate observation is that I've sold over 80 million records worldwide. A legitimate observation is that I've starred in films that have grossed billions of dollars. A legitimate observation is that I've built businesses that employ hundreds of people. Those are facts. What you're doing is an observation. It's character assassination disguised as interview questions. The studio was electric with tension. The audience sat frozen, witnessing something that felt historic. This wasn't the polished, carefully controlled Jennifer Lopez they were used to seeing. This was someone who had been pushed past her breaking point and was finally fighting back. Joy tried one more time to salvage her position. I think you're being overly sensitive. These are fair questions about public figures and their authenticity. Fair questions? Jennifer's voice rose, filling the studio with a power that reminded everyone why she had become a star in the first place. Let me ask you some fair questions, Joy. What have you built? What have you created? What have you contributed to the world besides sitting at this table and tearing other people down? She paused, letting the questions land before continuing. I came to this country's biggest stage with nothing but a dream and a work ethic that would break most people. I've been a dancer, a singer, an actress, a producer, a businesswoman. I've failed publicly and gotten back up. I've been humiliated by the tabloids and kept going. I've raised 2 children while maintaining a career that would exhaust someone half my age. And I've done it all while people like you question whether I deserve any of it. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Jennifer held up her hand with an authority that silenced the entire room. No, you've had your turn. You've questioned my authenticity, my relationships, my entire life's work. Now you're going to listen. She turned to face Joy directly, her eyes blazing with an intensity that made several people in the front row lean back in their seats. You know what I think this is really about, Joy? I think this is about the fact that I refuse to apologize for my success. I think it bothers you that a Latina girl from the Bronx has achieved more than you ever will. I think you look at everything I've built, and instead of being inspired, you feel threatened. So you try to tear it down because that's easier than examining why my success makes you so uncomfortable. The accusation hit its mark. Joy's face went through several shades of red as she struggled to formulate a response. The other hosts sat in stunned silence, clearly unsure whether to intervene or let this historic moment play out. That's ridiculous, Joy finally managed. I'm not threatened by you. I'm just asking hard questions. Hard questions? Jennifer laughed, but there was no humor in it. A hard question would be asking me about the challenges of being a woman of color in an industry that still doesn't know how to handle us. A hard question would be asking about the business decisions I've made that people said would fail. A hard question would be asking about what it takes to stay relevant for 3 decades in an industry that discards women the moment they turn 30. She shook her head slowly, her disappointment palpable. But you didn't ask any of those questions. You asked about my marriages. You questioned whether my love is real. You suggested that my entire career is built on manipulation rather than talent. Those aren't hard questions, Joy. Those are cheap shots from someone who doesn't have anything meaningful to contribute. Whoopi finally attempted to intervene. Maybe we should take a moment and redirect this conversation. But Jennifer wasn't finished. Decades of smiling through interviews, of deflecting criticism with grace, of being the bigger person while smaller people took shots at her. All of it was coming to the surface now. No, Whoopi, with all due respect, I think people need to hear this. She turned back to Joy. You sit at this table every day with a platform that reaches millions of people. You have the power to lift people up, to start meaningful conversations, to challenge ideas in ways that actually matter. And what do you do with that power? You use it to tear down women who have worked their entire lives to achieve something. You use it to question whether people's love is real, whether their success is deserved, whether their authenticity is genuine. She paused, her voice dropping to something quieter, but somehow more powerful. That's not journalism, Joy. That's not entertainment. That's just cruelty with a microphone, and I refuse to sit here and validate it by pretending your questions have any merit." The silence that followed was absolute. Joy sat frozen in her chair, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. The other hosts stared at their hands, at their notes, anywhere but at the scene unfolding before them. The audience seemed to be holding their collective breath. Jennifer gathered her things with the deliberate calm of someone who had made an irrevocable decision. Before she left, she turned to address the camera directly, speaking not to Joy, not to the hosts, but to the millions of people watching at home. To everyone watching this who has ever been made to feel like your success isn't real, like your love isn't valid, like you have to apologize for everything you've achieved, I want you to know something. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't have to justify your journey to people who have never walked in your shoes. Keep building, keep loving, keep being exactly who you are. Because at the end of the day, the people who tear others down do it because they have nothing to build themselves. She turned back to Joy one final time, her expression unreadable. "I hope someday you find whatever it is you're looking for by making other people feel small. But I suspect you won't find it. People who build their careers on cruelty usually end up alone with nothing but their own bitterness for company." With that, Jennifer Lopez walked off the stage with her head held high, her heels clicking against the floor in a rhythm that sounded almost like applause. The audience sat in stunned silence. The cameras kept rolling, capturing Joy Behar sitting alone at the table, looking smaller somehow than she had when the interview began. What had started as a promotional appearance for a documentary had become something else entirely, a moment of reckoning, a demonstration of what happens when a woman who has spent her entire life being underestimated finally decides to stop playing nice. And as the studio fell into uncomfortable silence, it was clear to everyone watching exactly who had won this confrontation. The girl from the Bronx had faced down another challenger, and once again, she had emerged victorious. What do you think about this incredible confrontation? Was Joy Behar out of line, or was she just doing her job? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that will absolutely leave you speechless.